As a physiologist and breathing coach, I see 5 dysfunctional breathing patterns mostly that people are experiencing that will create more stress in the body. They'll activate that sympathetic fight or flight nervous system state, and being aware of your particular stress breathing pattern is going to give you a lot of power as a leader, as a communicator, in your personal life, and overall helping you become more balanced in your well-being. Let's check out the 5 dysfunctional breathing patterns. This is sometimes called a breathing pattern disorder, but what I've seen is many people have these. It becomes a breathing pattern disorder when you get stuck in one of these. However, many of us, all of us, experience stress in our life. And usually that emotional stressor or that external stressor that we feel in life, maybe even internal stress where we're in our thought life worried about something or overthinking something. Stress can come from a lot of different areas in our well-being. And when that happens, when we feel stressed, our breathing pattern will often change in response to that stress. It can become a vicious cycle because we are unaware of those breathing patterns, and those breathing patterns create physiologically more stress. So we're having these psychological stressors in our life, emotional stressors, and then we're also, or physical stressors, having an injury can be really stressful. Being a new mom, postpartum period can be really stressful. So there are physical stressors as well. But somehow we are getting stressed and then we're breathing in a stressed way that creates that vicious cycle that's keeping us in that stress pattern. Over time, it can create a lot of dysfunction in the body. It can create a lot of dysfunction in our mental state. Anxiety also has a breathing pattern disorder element to it. Think about when somebody is having panic attacks. Is it only just a psychological issue, or has there been a physiological change that has occurred that's creating that response in the body? There's a lot of physiological changes that are happening that we can become really empowered if we have, let's say, anxiety, or we get super stressed and overwhelmed, or we're having physical pain, or we're trying to heal postpartum, or we have depression. Like, we can do things in our own physiology that can get us out of that cycle. I call it an intervention, but we can use our breath as a breathing intervention. Let's get into those 5 dysfunctional breathing patterns, and then I'll talk to you about ways that we can intervene, that we can help ourselves. And what's great about this is it's free. Your breath is free. It's all natural. There's no side effects. There's no, weight gain. There's no, all these different side effects from these different medications. Those are real. There are side effects. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not sitting here telling you not to take medication for it. What I'm saying is my own experience from having overcome postpartum anxiety and panic attacks was that if I worked on my breath over time, that was the key to my healing. Yes, I worked with counselors. I worked on the psychological side of things as well, but there's a physiological symptom and condition going on that you can take an intervention in and really help support your emotional healing. Let's get into that. The first breathing pattern disorder I see, which is usually the most common, is mouth breathing. Now, many people think, oh, I don't breathe through my mouth. Not me. No way. Take notice. When you're rushed, when you're in front of a screen, hyper-focused, when you're emailing people and you're maybe anticipating what you need to say next, if you're preparing for a meeting or a presentation, a speech, notice if you slip into a mouth breathing pattern. If you have a fight with a loved one or with your partner, notice how you're breathing around these stressors. Notice if you're breathing through your mouth during exercise. If it's not that high intensity, you should be nasal breathing, or at very least breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. So throughout the day, I want you to take inventory, get connected, become aware, use your mindfulness to drop into the body and notice if you're mouth breathing. This is going to be the first one I want people to overcome. At rest, so during sleep, which there's ways to track that, are you breathing through your nose? During the day, are you breathing through your nose? And for most exercise, are you breathing through your nose? I want you breathing through the nose as much as possible. There's a lot of benefit to nasal breathing. This is the filtration device. This is the intended vessel mechanism for breathing. If you inhale through your mouth, suck it in, then what you're doing is getting too much volume of air coming in. Okay, so you want to slow it down by breathing through the nose. You will humidify. There's antiviral, antifungal mechanisms in the nose, so it purifies the air that's coming in. It gets it to the right temperature for the body. So there's a lot of benefit. And the final benefit I'm just gonna brush on because I talk about it a lot in this channel, but it is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is picked up in the nasal cavity. That means when you're mouth breathing, you're missing the benefit of nitric oxide. There are so many benefits to nitric oxide. It's actually in a lot of medications we have, but there's so many benefits to nitric oxide, and the more you breathe through the nose, the more likely you're going to be getting this, you will be getting this into the body. Here's some of the benefits of nitric oxide for you to check out. I just want to include them. I want to bring it up because often if you're going to start to work on these breathing techniques, it's really helpful to know what they're doing in the body. What's the benefit? That to me is really motivating. If I'm trying to, change a behavior, which breathing is a behavior. So if I'm trying to change a behavior, it's not all about trying. It's about getting your thoughts involved and having a why. And when you look at the benefits here for nitric oxide, who wouldn't be excited about
mouth
nasal
breathing at night?
If you are breathing through the mouth at night, you are more likely to have things like sleep apnea, not as good sleep. We're sleeping a third of our life away. So we want to make sure that we're getting really restful sleep. There's a ton of research on how important sleep is for our health. So if you are mouth breathing at night, you might wake up with a really dry throat. Your spouse might say you snore, something like that. You might know already. If you do, I recommend these mouth taping, and I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. Look how busted this box is. These mouth taping devices. So this is what they look like. I'll open one up for you. Whoops, like I already opened one up there. I swear I have one. Okay, they're all missing. I've done this demonstration too much. I go into companies and I talk about communications, wellness, mindfulness, breath work, just stress management types of techniques. I feel like the corporate world really needs this mindfulness stuff. So I'm gonna actually use one of these for you real quick. Now this is just a recommendation. Always go talk to your doctor first. But if you know you're dealing with even apnea, like the early stages of apnea, the treatment later on is gonna be a CPAP machine. I'm telling you, that thing is not comfortable. I've had clients who use it. And if there's a small little intervention like this, and I know taping your mouth might seem a little crazy, but this has been around for about 10 years at least. And it's really a conservative treatment when you think about the alternative, which is a CPAP machine. So just a food for thought. Now I can't talk to you, but you can see I can actually get some air through, so it's not, you can actually see I can get some air through, so it's not suffocating me. It's just helping me train that nasal breathing pattern. The other thing I would recommend is if you know you're struggling with mouth breathing and you want to ease into this, which is the way I recommend it, ease into it, please. This is called the nose breathe. I have clients just use this maybe 15, 20 minutes a day. It's basically a mouth guard, right? So we use this, and this will slowly help us train to that nasal breathing pattern without maybe having to go a whole night starting with the mouth taping. It's just an easy way to get into it. So again, benefits are the nitric oxide. I think that's the most powerful benefit here, to breathe through your nose. Also, just the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. This is what you were created to breathe through. So we want to make sure we're breathing through it. If you don't use the nose a lot, you start to lose the capacity to breathe through your nose. If you're somebody like that, you're often maybe congested, those types of things. So this will also help you with some of the sinus issues. It's not the only cure. I know that many people struggle with that, and it's a lot more than just a coach here telling you to breathe through your nose. So I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying that if you don't use that pathway, you start to lose the function in that area. It's really, really important. Likely you've been breathing this way for a long time, probably since childhood. So be gentle with yourself as you're retraining your breath. We all think we breathe well, but what I found is many of us do not, especially when we're stressed. Mouth breathing is that first dysfunctional breathing pattern. The next dysfunctional breathing pattern I see is what I call vertical breathing. If you're really stressed, you've probably heard this before, take a deep breath. Somebody will tell you that, take a deep breath. And so what do? You take a deep breath, or the doctor puts the stethoscope on your chest right up here and they say, take a deep breath. And you're like, okay, that's the way we think we're supposed to take a deep breath. Now, if you've been pregnant, if you're a woman and you've carried a child, your diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm moves up, the ribs come out, and you kind of get stuck in this shallow breathing pattern. That's why the first thing we retrain after we have a baby, and preferably before, during pregnancy, we're training that good breathing mechanics so that we can breathe well postpartum and we're not stuck in a vertical shallow breathing, or if you're mouth breathing and vertical breathing pattern. When you suck in on the inhale, like so many of us do to take that deep breath, you're moving the diaphragm in a reversed paradoxical breathing pattern. It's called a reversed breathing pattern. This is a problem. The problem lies in the way that the muscle, the diaphragm, is being used. The problem lies in that you're using secondary breathing muscles, your neck and your shoulders, as your primary mover, primary movers for that breath. So neck and shoulder pain, if you're doing this 20 to 25,000 times a day, you're going to create a lot of tension in this upper body. What I'd like to see is horizontal breathing. I want quiet neck and shoulders. They might move a little bit. They are muscles. They're secondary breathing muscles. But your primary breathing muscle is your diaphragm, and it's located around underneath your ribs. And when you inhale, it should flatten down. When it flattens down, this pressure, as it lowers down, creates almost like an expansion in the body. You should feel a stretch in the belly, not just the belly, but you should feel a stretch in the belly, a stretch in the low back here, a stretch in the pelvic floor and the glute area and the butt area. So guys, you have a pelvic floor too. You have those muscles. You should feel them eccentrically lengthen, so lower down and stretch. And you should feel the ribs expand out laterally. That's the breath I'm looking for. So now, instead of taking a deep breath like this, sucking in, I want you to put your hands on your ribs if you're able to and breathe expanding out. I call it a 360-degree breath. Think like you're blowing up a balloon on that inhale and it expands out. Think like a ball here in the center opens on your inhale and then everything hugs in on the exhale. Retraining that breathing pattern will take time. This is where conscious breathing, I like to recommend 2 to 5 minutes of conscious 360-degree breathing through the nose as people's first kind of step into working on their breath, working on the mechanics of their breathing. One more thing to take notice of when you are told to take a deep breath and you do so, and you do something like this where you suck in, or you're doing that during exercise, or throughout the day you take these big deep breaths, these hard deep breaths. What that does is your inhale is connected to your sympathetic nervous system response. The bigger, the harder, the longer we take our inhale in, the more we're going to activate our sympathetic nervous system response. That's going to mean that we're going to create some kind of stimulus, some kind of, maybe you call it stress in the body when we take those big breaths. Just like if a car came across this video now and went to hit me, I would do this almost automatically because that's a fear response. And many of us are doing that throughout our day. And we don't need to breathe like that. We need to breathe low We need to breathe slow. We need to breathe light, calm, and even breaths. We're going to get into the even breath after this. But I just want you to think about that. The exhale is connected to the parasympathetic nervous system state. So throughout the day, in each breath, you're kind of modulating that nervous system. But imagine if you were inhaling really hard, inhaling. See how that starts to build up, where we're taking in these big, deep, quick breaths. That will lead to a thing we call over-breathing. It's a dysfunctional breathing pattern. Over-breathing, and I talk about this on my channel a lot, leads to air hunger. Air hunger leads to panic attacks. Do you see how this is all connected? And trust me, the only way I know this is because my background is in physiology. I've been teaching yoga since 2010, and I had postpartum anxiety and panic attacks that I overcame through counseling and through breath work, not through medication, even though that was recommended by several doctors. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm sharing my experience and what I've kind of come to learn after working with hundreds of clients with their breathing. I'm giving you food for thought, hopefully giving you some things you can work on and start to incorporate to overcome these stressed breathing patterns. Number 3, I know this is long. I hope it's helpful. I know I'm trying to pack a lot into one video, but I was feeling inspired to talk about this. I just gave a presentation to a big group of people, and every time I go in person and I talk to these big groups, I'm reminded that people don't know this stuff. Nobody taught you how to breathe well. Nobody taught you proper breathing mechanics. Nobody taught us what it looks like when we're breathing in a stress breathing pattern, and that we can breathe in a way that's going to support our nervous system state and the rest of our body. Nobody taught me that breath was connected to our emotional state. There's so much that we just didn't know. And when I am in front of people, I'm reminded that, so I have to share. I feel compelled. For dysfunctional breathing pattern, other than mouth breathing, other than paradoxical vertical breathing, is the gripping. I see this one. This one is called a gripping breathing pattern. Gripping means that some people will hold, sometimes it's called upper ab gripping, where you kind of crunch down here and you hold all this in. This will give you a little like pooch at the bottom here. So that's a form of gripping. Another form of gripping is just throughout the day when you're hyper-focused on even small tasks. Like for me, I noticed it in my body when I was making my kids food at night and I was kind of rushing. I noticed I would hold my belly in. I also noticed I was doing it in odd places, like on the couch when I was sitting next to my husband and we were watching a movie. I was, for some reason, holding my belly in anticipation. I noticed sometimes even in the shower, I'll be like, okay, relax your belly. You're not able to breathe correctly when you're holding a contraction in your core. Many women I work with even men who were dancers tend to breathe in this pattern. I also see people who have experienced trauma, which all of us have experienced some type of trauma, but somebody who has experienced maybe an acute trauma complex or trauma that's lasted a long time, they'll have this kind of gripping pattern where they hold their breath. The problem with that and retention, when we get into some of the breathing interventions, retention is a really great way to help us overcome some of these things. But I'm talking about a different retention. When you're holding your breath, you're retaining the breath, but it's almost subconsciously. And what happens is when you finally do breathe again, so you're holding the breath, then you start to breathe really fast and really rapid. So you're kind of like overcompensating for that breath hold. I categorize this as an irregular breathing pattern. What I want to see is a nice even breath. I want to see a 4 or 5 second inhale followed by a 4, 5 second exhale. It's even, it's balanced. And I'd like to see that throughout the day, not these periods where we're writing an email and we're holding our breath. So that's another stressed or dysfunctional breathing pattern you can become aware of. Again, I'll get into the interventions at the end. The next one I see a lot of is a over-breathing. I tapped on this, but it's basically just your respiratory rate. How fast are you breathing? Are you here? If you're breathing, you can check yourself and try not to change your breathing pattern. I have some breathing assessments on my channel. You can use those, but you can check how fast you're breathing. Just set your timer for 1 minute, see how many breaths you take in 1 minute. If you're in 18, 19, 20 breaths a minute, that's too fast. That's like a low-grade hyperventilation. We want to be more in the 8 to 12 breaths a minute. So that's something to check in on. Again, respiratory rate, when it's that high and it stays that high, creates more stress in the body. It activates that sympathetic nervous system state. And what we need is more the balanced, a lower breathing rate. And we need to be conscious of when we start to overbreathe and when our breathing rate starts to increase. I'm not talking about exercise, that's going to happen. We need to challenge ourselves. That is good for you, but I'm just talking about what I call your ADLs, the activities of daily living. And these are your breathing habits, your daily breathing habits. These are the things we're trying to overcome. So those are the main 4 breathing habits that I see my clients deal with. Last one I want to recommend, or something I see, is when somebody, like I mentioned, is having spits of panic attacks. This is getting more and more common, and I want to introduce the idea of how not only our lifestyle, what we eat, the pace in which we are working ourselves, but how our technology and these screens are affecting our nervous system. And it comes in kind of through the eyes. So I listened to a neuroscientist, he was also an eye doctor, and he was explaining this, and it really clicked for me, and it makes sense. So I'm sure you felt this yourself. It's been researched. It's called screen apnea. Email apnea, I think, is the other name for it. But when you are on a screen, even sometimes a big screen, but definitely these small screens, your eyes focus in and you're in more of a sympathetic nervous system state. Just like when you're really, really focused, kind of as we evolved, primal time, we're going to hunt for the animals and we focus in on that kill, on that animal we're trying to get. We're hyper-focused on that. And so the same thing's happening when you're hyper-focused here. Eye doctors will recommend being out in nature and getting more of a panoramic view, like you're on the top of a mountaintop. And when you're more in a panoramic view and your eyes, your gaze is larger, we shift more into a parasympathetic state. How cool is that? So just consider every time you're here, you're already going to be more in a sympathetic nervous system response. Then what I see is people, and this is what's been researched and called email or screen apnea, is people are changing their breathing pattern. Now, it's not just holding. We also see just slipping into that shallow vertical breathing pattern. We also see mouth breathing. So it's kind of any one of these dysfunctional breathing patterns, but this in and of itself is something to be mindful about. And so what do you do with all this? The great news is that your breath is voluntary. You can breathe consciously, and it also will happen involuntary. We use voluntary breathing or conscious breathing, breath work, sessions to start to train our breath so that now it will eventually become more automatic for you to breathe out of the nose. Eventually, through gentle training and some time, be patient, you'll start to automatically breathe in a 360-degree pattern. Your body likes to be in homeostasis, so when you start this breath work, you'll see you'll make some good gains because your body's like, thank you, finally, your body really does want to be in balance. Start small. My favorite breathing technique, like I said, is just to have people start with nasal breathing and working on that 360-degree pattern. 2 to 5 minute sessions, 1 to 3 times a day. Morning, middle of the day, evening. Now, if you're experiencing a lot of overwhelm, a lot of stress, then we can get into the breathing rate. If you're not really experiencing a lot of anxiety, overwhelm, and stress, just focus on a 4-4 breathing cow. It's a 4-second inhale, followed by a 4-second exhale. Start there. If you have a lot of stress in your life, and you know this, you'll know this, then you're going to want to slow down your breathing rate because we want to activate more of that parasympathetic nervous system state, and you want to do it in that 360-degree breathing pattern because there's a hole through your diaphragm muscle and the vagus nerve travels through there. The vagus nerve is connected to our parasympathetic nervous system. And so when you breathe in that 360-degree pattern, you're activating the vagus nerve, yes, You're also getting nitric oxide, which I showed you the benefits there. If you're breathing through the nose, you're going to be doing wonders for your body. And a little bit goes a long ways. If you want to do more to decrease that stress response, then you're going to breathe in for 4, out for 8. So we lengthen the exhale. That means if you're breathing correctly, when your diaphragm lowers down and flattens out on the inhale, and then when it goes up on the exhale, when you're breathing like that, you're massaging that vagus nerve. That stimulates it. So that's a good thing. That exhale is more attached to our parasympathetic nervous system response. Definitely be breathing in through the nose. Some people need to start by breathing in through the nose and then out through the mouth. You can also do a shushing sound. You can also do a humming sound. Now if you're like, no thank you, humming, just be mindful to know, and I have a whole video on humming bee breath on my channel, that will stimulate more nitric oxide in the nasal cavity. Remember all those benefits? So don't make it weird, just take your time, do your breathing, and let it do the work for you, all right? Just give this as a gift to yourself. The final breathing technique I'm going to mention, I'm not going through them all today because this is already a super long video, but I want to mention is box breathing. That means we're inhaling for 4, holding our breath for 4, exhaling for 4, and holding our breath for 4. This is a box breathing pattern that's very effective to down-regulate, calm the nervous system, move you from stress to more calm, more grounded. Doesn't that sound good? If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe. If you want to bring me in for a training with your team, if you want to coach with me one-on-one, I am available. I'm here to help. Breathe well, live well, and speak well. Have a great day.